Hello and welcome to the latest Brown&Co podcast. My name is Olivia Burfoot, agri-business consultant from the Leicester office, and today I'm joined with Henry Haworth, energy manager from the Lincoln office. Today we are going to be talking about renewables. So, Henry, what technology is currently out there that you see as the best opportunity for clients?
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. So at the moment, we're still working sort of three major technologies, which is wind, solar, and anaerobic digestion. And our work is split between doing on-site production for our clients to offset their own power and also larger rental schemes. So at the moment, we're still seeing quite a lot of value in clients investing in solar for their own use. So panel prices are cheaper than they've ever been. But the key thing there is ensuring that clients are offsetting their own power rather than exporting it all to the grid. It's also key to really have rooftop, because rooftop mounted doesn't require planning permission. So that's definitely still something that we're working on. There's obviously less sites now available because solar's been out for quite a while, so there's a lot installed. In terms of wind turbines, so although there was planning changes in July last year, the industry's taken a little bit of a while to pick its feet up again. So at the moment, we've not seen many on-site turbines because planning is still difficult. Ultimately, you're putting in a wind turbine that is, 70 to 100 meters high. That's going to have significant planning concerns and probably quite a lot of local opposition. However, on the developer scale for rental, we're starting to see more and more interest in wind turbines. And that is because there's been allocations within the grid to allow wind energy in, which in our area, sort of in the east of England, there's quite a big allocation towards wind, whereas the solar allocation's been really made up already. Wind has got a big allocation that's not seeing the development in the pipeline. So that could be something that's going to be really interesting over the next couple of years. And then anaerobic digestion is an area we're working on a lot at the moment. We're working towards a subsidy scheme called the Green Gas Support Scheme, and that's due to end in March 2028. However, we have heard that there's likely to be an announcement to an extension for that. So while at the moment we don't see the potential for any new AD sites to get planning permission and commission in time for the scheme, if there is an extension, that will give us sort of a new lease of life. We're also following that, expecting an extension to that scheme. So the three main technologies still all have their areas, but they're sort of in peaks and troughs following any sort of policy announcements at the moment.
And what are the main risks and considerations for a client developing a new project?
So one I touched on already. So if you're a client, so one of our clients, if they're developing it themselves, something that they need to think about is, do I have any on-site usage? A really key thing is if you're selling electricity into the grid, not using any yourself, you're likely at the moment to be getting somewhere between 5 to 7 pence a kilowatt hour. Your power that you're paying for is more in the region of 25 to 20 pence. So you can see just from those numbers, there's a clear benefit to our clients to have as much on-site usage that they can offset as possible. And one of the risks is saying, okay, I've got this much, I've got a certain amount of on-site usage over the year. That really doesn't give you the profile of when you use it. Renewables, obviously solar, it's quite obvious that solar is going to be generating during the day. Wind is a little bit more uncertain, and AD is a constant sort of generation. So a key thing is, rather than progressing forward with a technology provider that said, yes, this will offset your needs, is to do some more detailed modeling and make sure you're putting in the right scale for your site. We've experienced lots of sites where they put in too much or too little and are having to sort of subsequently adjust that, and it's costing them a lot more. So that would be my main one to think about. The other is grid connection. So in a lot of areas, people have been told they can't get grid connection, and grid connection does make a project a lot more viable. While you might have been told you couldn't get grid connection in the past, this could have changed. So there's been a lot of work on the grid. There's a lot of grid forms going on. Projects drop in and out. So it's always worth, if you've allowed someone to tell you, oh, there's no grid connection and that stopped your project, that doesn't necessarily mean it's still a project stopper now. So always consider that, yes, you could still get grid connection. It's all about timing, and often it can be about having the right contacts in the grid that will guide you correctly to whether or not you can get that connection.
You've spoken about subsidies. Do you see a return for government subsidies to support the renewable generation?
That is a question we're asked a lot by clients is, will we have a return to the feed-in tariff to help me put this solar in or this wind project? And if I'm being honest, my answer is no. We're unlikely to see a subsidy scheme like that again, simply because at the moment solar projects are viable to go ahead without the subsidy. So the subsidy schemes have effectively worked. Solar and wind are both being developed without that subsidy. However, obviously I mentioned already with the anaerobic digestion, there is currently a subsidy scheme there that may be extended because it's not quite got to the development level that there's, it's viable without it, but we still do need green gas. So that's likely to maintain a subsidy scheme for a bit longer. What we are seeing and what it's worth keeping a lookout for is more regional based grants. So we recently in Yorkshire have done a few projects where they have locally been for agricultural holdings, been promoting solar. So we've been able to do some grant applications there. So that's an area that's most likely to continue to develop. Of councils have their need to sort of decarbonise in their areas. We're likely to see the regional grants come into play. So it's always worth keeping an eye out for those, and ringing up your local consultant who keeps an eye on these things to ask them, is there any grants available?
Does carbon reporting fit into the renewables sector?
So carbon reporting is something that as a business and me personally I've been doing for the last 12 years. It's something that we've largely been doing on feedstocks for anaerobic digestion, and that's been effectively working out how much carbon is associated with the growing of a feedstock that's going into an anaerobic digestion plant, effectively to ensure that the gas being generated is lower carbon than if we were to just take gas out of the North Sea. So that's a key metric that we've needed to assess for that time. Where we are now with carbon reporting is that there's a lot more land carbon credits being issued. So this is where you would effectively assess your farm for the amount of carbon it's producing, the potential for sequestration in your soil, setting a baseline, and then any additionality you can provide over a year or 2 years, you can then have that issued as credits. A ton of carbon is effectively the same as one carbon credit, and these can be sold in the market to basically high carbon producers. So lots of big businesses are really keen to invest in these, and we recently at Brown&Co have released a sort of a 3-tiered system for carbon reporting. So we have sort of the lower baseline, where we'll just do an audit to assess where your business currently is, and then we go up to looking at calculating, verifying and selling credits, and sort of the higher level is sort of the wider businesses, so not just farming businesses but looking into the supply chain as well and doing more detailed sort of carbon reporting. And I guess a key thing that links to renewable energy as well is if you're a business that might have requirements either from within your sector or government requirements to reduce your carbon emissions, you've been set a threshold, then renewable energy is a key way that you can obviously reduce that carbon output by obviously having renewable electricity on site. So they sort of tie together quite nicely. But I guess it's an area of work that we're seeing more and more interest in. And while there's little government support currently, there is a private market, and the projections for carbon itself as a sort of an area and a sector is that it will, we're sort of at a tipping point now where it's going to get much, much bigger very quickly.
Thanks, Henry. I think that's given a really good overview of the renewable technology out there and the potential opportunities for landowners and farmers. Stay tuned for our next Brown&Co podcast, where we'll be discussing environmental schemes.